Good evening. Graduates, I count it a privilege to stand before you once more as your teacher, to share a little of our waning time together for one final lesson. Over the years, we've talked about matters as grave as how to prepare for the hour of death, and as light as the proper technique for dicing an onion. This talk, I believe, will be somewhere in the middle. Tonight's event is appropriately called both your graduation and commencement, the marking of one time's ending and another's beginning. Honored guests, as any student of Pacifica can roll their eyes and tell you, I enjoy to a distressing degree discussions on the nature of time and how we observe its passage. So tonight, I'd like to offer a few prepared remarks on how we might mark this moment in time and discern its meaning in a manner befitting true Tritons. Graduates, you've had about 180 days of school in each of your 4 years with us. That accounts for about 5,000 hours of your seething youth. That is a lot of time. But as I hope you've been persuaded by now, the amount of time only begins to scratch the surface of the meaning of time. To be fully human, we need more than quantity can tell us. We need an account for the quality of our time as well. We can learn to cope with life by counting seconds alongside the clock. But to flourish, we need significance, and we need a good story. It strikes me, though, that this is exactly what we've attempted to do in the ways we have narrated your progress through high school. We didn't just resort to a mere numerical sequence, first year, second year, and so on. We adopted instead a puzzling sequence of names for each of the years: freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. This is, of course, an established convention far too common to question, yes? But I'd suggest that if we fail to ask a good question here, we will put ourselves in great peril of failing to realize that these names don't tell us very much at all. And if they are the chapter headings of the story of how we got here tonight, we are in deep trouble. So let's dare to ask the good question: what do these names really mean? Of the four, freshman is the easiest. Linguistically, the adjective fresh yields us two broadly applicable senses. The first is fresh, as in unsalted, like spring water compared to a stagnant tide pool. The fresh is where we expect to find vitality supportive of life, and often we do. The charm of fresh students freshens a frazzled faculty, refreshing an institution with new ideas and personas. Such students are fresh like produce that has not yet begun to spoil, and thus does not yet require salt to preserve. It is a brief and sweet time where they are who they really are. But alas, entropy sets in, and a teacher soon must pack the classroom with a layer of salt to keep it at bay. Some cohorts of students leave behind their freshness in the way of a dry-aged ribeye. Their intellectual fermentation is time mingled with meticulous method to produce near mystical results. But all can go awry with the arrival of just one dastardly spore. Suddenly, our sourdough sprouts like so many a freshman boy, a fine layer of fuzz on its face. Such students lose their freshness and simply become salty. And as they do, they become fresh in its terminally tragic sense of impudent, insolent, presumptuous, and cheeky. The barest whisper of experience threatens to undermine their whole education by tempting them to abandon their only real intellectual asset, the ability to admit that they don't know very much at all. If preserved, this good confession will save them. If lost, the knowledge that they go on to acquire in the rest of their time will likely become a great deal of rot. Onward to second year, and the strange species we call the sophomore, an archaic name for an arguer. To any non-parent, this sounds good at first. Argument is a noble form of speech where science and art and intuition align. Sadly, for our second-year student, this is not the kind of argument the term has in mind. Instead, we go back to the older word sophism, the ruinous habit of mind that mistakes incessant opining for substantial debate. The sophomore is divided against themselves. Their nature yearns at once for Sophia or wisdom, while battling at the same time the inertia of Moria, foolishness. They know some things while not knowing many things. Wisdom draws nearer than when they first began, and so begins the temptation for such a student to say, "That's probably good enough." But it is not so. Sophomores settle into habits that convert into concrete character for the rest of high school and sometimes for the rest of life. Some become like Shakespeare's Polonius, stuffed with borrowed proverbs, bulky and bloated, but without substance or strength. Some become Shakespeare's Hamlet, adamant to know only what they already know, enslaved to the ghosts of their own twittering thoughts and impulses. And yet, thanks be to God, there are those who choose the better way, those who hear Lady Wisdom approaching and make tidy the rooms of their souls for her arrival. This sophomore learns to live by declaring their foolishness with as much confidence as their fledgling wisdom. And only they are on the road to becoming true philosophers, true lovers of wisdom, because they refuse to lose sight of that little moron inside all of us. They embrace wise foolishness as the merciful mark of honest learners, always in need of rigor and improvement, yes, but always in need of humility as well. It's here in the middle we reach a bizarre break in the logic of this naming convention. Freshman now is clear to us. Sophomore has become obvious as well. What then are we to make of the junior and the senior? They're clearly related as binary terms. We might rightly ask, though, a junior and a senior what? This cannot be a matter of chronology, because the juniors are the second most aged group of the lot. Junior compared to senior, senior compared to junior, neither obviously illuminates the other. But I have a theory. Perhaps sophomore is the last named year because it is actually the underlying quality of every remaining step of the intellectual journey. Every step into wisdom presupposes the humility to be led from ignorance into truth. Like Socrates, only by knowing what we don't know do we begin to yearn for something to know. Once the third year begins, we declare students to be junior practitioners of the noble art of wise foolishness. We then graciously declare them in the fourth year to be seniors, to indicate that progress can and should be made over time, even if it has yet to become clear that they're advancing much. Advancement, in the end, is not a function of time past, but the depth to which they comprehend the mystery of the wise fool. Graduates, if you have dedicated yourselves to this practice, I'm here to tell you tonight that you're needed very much beyond those doors. You enter a world beset by attempts to coerce a false simplicity in the name of fear and power and control. There are problems out there, and they need your attention. But I urge you now, as I have always done, to see first and always how the great battle out there must begin as the great battle in here. The main front of your crusade is at the line between wisdom and ignorance that runs through every human heart. And if you're at a loss for what to do after you leave the stage tonight, I'd suggest you start there. But before you do, one thing remains. We've explored together the meaning of these 4 years and the 4 names you have acquired in them. Yet something is missing. The 4 pieces still hang so separately. We find ourselves in need of a quintessence, a 5th element to unite them all. And I propose that the 5th name might be this: founders. It is not lost on us that you're the last class of the first age of the school. You have sometimes called yourselves the last founders, but already I believe you have seen the limits and inadequacies of that phrase. You did not build from scratch, but on the centuries of human years of formation and work represented in the members of the board, the admin, the staff, the faculty, and your parents. You did not remain alone. You needed the buy-in and the labor of those who came after you as they became the inheritors and hopefully the perfecters of your work. In a school, a church, a civilization, our good work is enabled by the work done before us, and it must always be preserved in the work of those who come after us. We inherit and we bequeath. You founded upon what we gave you as we founded on what was given to us. As Whitman said, the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. You have. And those who come will write the next one. The true end will reveal the final form of all things, and until then, there is only the founding. It will be a very long time before we know the quality of our time together. We know the quantity, we've begun to sense the meaning, but there is much that remains as yet unseen. But take courage, wait and see. Like our new school building at 1499, much labor has to be spent in the depths, shoring up pillars so that the walls can stand tall. We do not see the goodness of such labor for a long time. Yet the grander the work, the more effort must be given at these invisible foundations. Lord willing, Pacifica will be such a grand work that your work and my work will need to be entirely underground. Cathedrals need deep roots. Strip malls do not. The deeds that endure for centuries belong to those crazy enough to live for something greater than themselves. Such deeds belong to wise fools, to sophomores like us. Only fools labor away at founding what they will not be able to enjoy themselves. Yet only the wise know that this kind of labor alone is worth doing. You have been founders, and the founding of Pacifica must continue. You are not the final founders of Pacifica, just as you will not be the final founders in life. But if you embrace this truth with good cheer, you will begin to see that in your time here, you have been shaped to be founders for all of life. Found good things. Embrace your small piece of the work, even if it is invisible. Do it well and do it continually. Take with you now the gifts of our wisdom and our ignorance. Take with you the good humor and humility of wise fools. And a little bit each day, take up again the vision and mission that held together your 4 years among us, for which you struggled valiantly, and for which we, your servants, gave you our lives in daily, costly love. My dear young people, never stop founding. Thank you.